Welcome back to another video, guys. So I've been meaning to make this video for the longest time, and that's how to get a building permit, I guess in Washington in my case, but it applies to pretty much anywhere across the country because Washington and California have some of the highest building restrictions. So this video will break down for beginners everything that you need to get a building permit, because I know it can be daunting for someone that's trying to buy completely undeveloped land and turn it into a fully permitted home like the Pacific Bin is here. So why even get a building permit in the first place? Number one is that the value of the home will track with all of the surrounding properties, and you know that the house is built right, it's sound, and that you don't have, say you hire on a contractor to do it for you, and if it's completely unpermitted, there's definitely some steps they can skip to get your house built quicker, and it'll work, but it may not exactly be the best quality. Secondly is that it's way easier to insure. You can hand an insurance company your paperwork, say here's my fully permitted home, the county stamped off on it, we're good to go. Insurance companies will just print out what your rate's going to be for a certain kind of coverage you want, and you'll be off to the races. And lastly, which kind of applies to the value, is that it makes it so much easier to sell. If a buyer's interested as you're selling your property, you can say, hey, here's the fully permitted deal. Everything is built to code, it was inspected, and there's no questions over that. It can be a little tricky selling if you build unpermitted and the buyer doesn't exactly know what's within your walls, what's underground. So getting a permit just makes the whole picture of owning, selling, maintaining, and running a home that much easier. Not to mention that it's going to be nearly impossible to get financing on an unpermitted build. If a bank sees you're getting a permit, doing everything the right way, they're way more willing to give you a construction loan. So I'm going to try and break this down as simple as possible and give you my experience getting the Pacific Bin permitted, signed off, built, and all of that, and everything that's required to get your building permit. I broke this down into 3 steps that are required to start building on your raw, undeveloped land. At the end of the video, I'm going to talk about some of the key lessons learned I had, and a lot of them relate to how to actually communicate with the county and your vendors that you're hiring out to put your plans together, because it is a make or break and can determine whether you're getting your permit 6 months down the road or you're getting it within just a couple months. Your first step is to get your land disturbing activity permit, and that shows exactly where your driveways are going to be running, where you want the house to go, where your septic drain field's going to go, where your well's going to go. Which the first step is to get a survey, unless there's already an existing survey done on the land, because you do need a record of survey for everyone to build their plans off of. Once the survey is complete, you then hire a critical area consultant. They'll come out to the property and they'll indicate if you have any wetlands, steep slopes, critical areas, which critical areas have buffers associated with them. So like in my case, in that far corner over there, we have wetland. It's actually not even on my property. It's on the neighbor's property. The buffer extends into my lot. So pretty much that critical area consultant just tells you where you can actually build, what's buildable portions of the land, and he gives you all your buffers and he stakes everything out to show where you have to take your measurements off of on where you can build. The 2 things that your critical area consultant will provide to you are a critical area site plan, that's part of your land disturbing activity permit, as well as your critical area study, and that breaks down all the vegetation that you have that's in buffers or steep slopes and what those setbacks are, or if you have streams, and they'll indicate how far the setback is from there. So I was able to work with my critical area consultant and give him a rough idea of what I wanted the site to look like, and he was able to show me exactly where the buffers are. We made a few little tweaks to get the home out of the buffers. So once you've completed all of your critical area studies and site plan, you can then kick off the drainage consultant or the civil engineer. So if you look up a civil engineer in your area, you'll be able to find a whole bunch that do drainage plans. Essentially, you have to redirect all the rainwater that's going on top of the roof of the home and redirect it. And in my case, we had to put an infiltration trench in, which is pretty much just some drain rock with some corrugated PVC running down it, so all the roof water drains without creating a whole bunch of erosion to topsoil. Civil engineer will also verify how much of your property can be covered with impervious systems. So in my case, I actually had to move the Pacific Bin a little bit farther forward because I was covering too much of the property with driveway, which kind of threw me off, and it was a good lesson learned, is that driveway, even if it's rock where water lands on it and just drains right through it, is still technically classified as an impervious system, I guess because it's compacted down, even though water doesn't sit on the driveway ever. But you definitely want to plan for that, and I actually had to move the Pacific Bin a little bit farther forward because I was covering too much of the property with driveway. And depending on what the requirements are, in Washington it's very strict. There's like 3 tiers where if you're under 1,500 square feet of coverage, you don't have to do a plan at all. If you're in 1,500 to like 5,000 square footage, you have to do a certain tiered report, and then over 5,000 is a full-blown drainage report, which I had to end up doing because there's quite a bit of driveway on my property. The last thing you want to note related to your land disturbing activity permit is that you do want to make sure that your lot is zoned appropriately so that you can actually develop it. Some lots, especially out here in Washington, are zoned forestry, which you either have to rezone, which can be a long, arduous process, or you can just find a lot that's already zoned to be developed. And in my case, I have an R5 zoned lot, which just stands for a rural 5-acre lot, which is totally acceptable to build homes on. So to recap, your land disturbing activity permit, you get your critical area site plan, your critical area study, your drainage plan. So there's a site plan that they'll develop and it'll show where all the drains are, your drainage report, and then you also just want to verify zoning, which you want to do that way before you even purchase the land. So before I run through the rest of the permitting information, I do have to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Membrane Solutions and SimPure. I've been using this Y10C model water filter for the last couple months, and it has been so nice. Not only was it super easy to set up, all you do is you plug it in and it's ready to go. The filters are in it, all set for 6,000 something glasses of water. But one of the coolest features about this is that it has a pitcher next to it, so it's able to keep this pitcher full of nice cold water. And I say cold water because there's actually a refrigeration mode on here where you're able to have the cooling function, so it keeps a reservoir of cold water in here. So all you do is click the cold water button and it pours you a nice cool glass of water. There's also a huge difference in how the water tastes from here versus coming out the tap. So you fill this guy up with tap water back here, and then it filters it through, gets out 98.6% of TDS, so total dissolved solids in the water, and it's wild how much different it tastes. Like when the tap water kind of tastes like, almost like chlorine, and you can tell there's chemicals in there. But this does an incredible job filtering it and tastes like that fresh spring water. Not only does Membrane Solutions have the water filter back there, but they also have this really cool air filter. And at first, I guess I'm a very skeptical person, so I'm like, does this thing really do anything? So I had it plugged in, just running on auto mode, continuously filtering the air. Like, I guess I didn't notice a huge difference at first until the next day I was cooking eggs on the stove. So it shows your air quality grade. So it like shows 001 right now, which means that the air is nice and clear and you can feel a nice like cool breeze coming off here. But the other day when I was cooking eggs, all of a sudden I hear this thing start ripping. I ran over to it. I'm like, what's going on? And it showed that all the particulate in the air was way higher. So it was able to automatically kick on its high mode and start to filter the air really fast because the exhaust system in my apartment is horrible. So this thing was able to filter the air, and it was a noticeable difference. Within 30 minutes, it really filtered all the air and got the air quality back down to 0.001. So part of the filter in this also has an anti-allergen component to it, which helps to filter out pollen. So springtime, that's going to be huge. I get allergies pretty bad, so this is going to be really nice to have it filtering all the air in my apartment. So this unit has the capability of 1,400 square feet of interior space, which my apartment is like 500, so it just cleans up the air super fast. So I put the links in the description down below if you guys are interested in getting this air filter or the water filter. That made a huge difference in my life, and they can definitely help you guys out too. So back to the video. So step number 2 is to get the health department approval. And what that entails is hiring a septic designer. So in my case, I'm standing in front of, I call it poo-poo pastures, but when you drive into the bin, you see a nice little grassy spot, and that's where the drain field is, off in the forest. But you hire a septic designer, and they tell you, based off of the site plan that you've developed with your civil engineer and your critical area consultant, they come out to your property and take a couple soil samples to see how well your soils drain so that they can design a septic system based around what kind of soils you have. Once the septic designer has located your drain field and have taken the soil sample, confirmed that that's going to work, they also locate where your septic tanks go. So in my case, it's a few feet off the house, and this, for example, is my first chamber where all the big heavies, so the toilet paper and the other heavies, settle down in this tank. It flows into the second settling tank, and then the last one, it flows down into this pump tank. So then from the pump tank, it pumps, it's pretty much water at this point. Well, you wouldn't want to drink it, but it's pretty much just water, and it pumps all the way out to the drain field over there, so it's a couple 100 feet away. But I guess when I was having my septic system designed, I didn't know that the tanks had to be right next to the house, which they don't always have to be, but it's convenient to have them next to the house for running power for the pumps and everything. So that was just a lesson learned for me. While your septic designer is locating your drain field, your septic tanks, tanks. They're also going to locate your pump house, which your pump house is where your well is. Depends where you live and what the conditions of your site are, but I believe it's normally around 150-foot setback from your drain field to your well, and you can figure out why those have to be separated, because you can't have all that nasty water that's getting filtered through the earth getting pumped right back up into your glass of water. Once your septic design is complete, your septic designer will submit it to the health department, and it can take anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks for them to review it and approve it. Typically, if you got a well-experienced septic designer that's worked all in the area, you can get it signed off on its first go. But once your septic designer tells you they've submitted to the county, get a confirmation receipt that it's actually been sent over. My septic designer said that he sent it over and it actually didn't get sent out until I followed up like a month later. So that kicked back my health department approval for my septic system by a whole month there, just because it missed the submission. So the last step to get the final health department approval is once your LDA is approved, you cut in your driveway, you get the well driller all the way back. He drills the well in the location the septic designer told you to put it, and then he takes a water sample from your well and he sends it out to a lab, and they verify that there's no harmful materials or minerals or anything that, like arsenic or whatever, that could poison you. So once your water sample checks out, then the health department knows, okay, the water that they're going to be using in the house is good. That same water is going to be going back down into the ground with all the septic waste, so there's no problem there. And that's the last step to get your health department approval. So number 3 is getting your building permit approval. I know it's all those extra steps. Get to this final culmination to get your building permit. So under your online portal on the building permit application, it shows LDA approval. So everything that went into your LDA, that has to be approved. Then it shows the health department underneath, and once the health department has bought off on everything, they send over their final letter of approval off to the county, so then that's approved. So then you need your structural and architectural plans for the actual construction of the home. So in my case, I worked with an architect engineering firm that are actually combined, so I was able to make that turnaround process that much quicker. And the architect and engineer have to be licensed in the state they're in, so that when they stamp it, they can verify that all of your egress windows are in the right location, that it meets all structural requirements, and that it meets snow load requirements, and if you're on a slope, that the foundation's designed correctly for your slope. So then once you get your structural plans, and you can be doing all of this while you're doing those other 2 health department and LDA steps, so then you submit the structural and architectural plans, and the last and final step was to hire an energy consultant, and they verify that the insulation that I have is adequate, all the appliances that are spec for the home meet Energy Star ratings. Once I finally got that together, my LDA approved, my health department approval, my structural, architectural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing plans, those have to be in there as well, and my energy report stamped, I could then take all of that, submit it to the county, and I ultimately got my building permit issued. Now I was lucky because I was really in the weeds with each one of these plans, making sure everything was perfect, so that as it did get submitted, we didn't have a resubmission. So every time a consultant would send me a new document to be submitted, I would just tear through it, make sure it's perfect, exactly what I wanted, and that it meets the site's conditions. Because if you submit something that isn't right, that it can get flagged, and you can go through weeks and months of resubmissions and saying why something is or isn't the way it's drawn. And it just makes the process so much smoother when you're verifying everything is exactly as you want it, so you don't have hiccups down the road. So that's everything that's needed to get all your paperwork through and submitted to get a building permit here in Washington, and it pretty much applies anywhere else in the country, maybe minus a few steps. But my last tip that can save you upwards of 6 months in getting your building permit issued is that you just need to be a good person when you're dealing with all your consultants, with people from the county. Don't blow up at someone if they tell you something needs to be a certain way. Most times they're more experienced because this is their job to do this, and they're bringing something up out of legitimate concern. Sometimes it can be ridiculous, but they're not trying to screw you. No one's out to get you. They're just trying to do their job. And I've found that most times when you blow up at someone, they lose your paperwork or something gets delayed more. And if you're just a good person and you're like, hey, I'm new to this, trying to figure out how this all works, and I want to further understand your comments here on why this needs to be redone or why it needs to be resubmitted a certain way, it just makes everyone's life so much easier. And it's a good chance that you actually mess something up on your end, because this is most likely one of your first times doing this. So just being a good person, trying to be as understanding as possible, even though some requests can be ridiculous. Like a lot of the stuff that's required in Washington, in my opinion, is pretty ridiculous, but it's just the steps you got to go through if you want to build a fully permitted home. So I hope this video was helpful. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm about to start building another home and I'm going through the whole permitting process on that right now. So if you want to follow along, watch me actually build the home myself, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the videos. And I got a fun little project here in the next couple of weeks that's going to be dropping on the YouTube channel while I wait for my building permit to go through. It's been a lot longer this time to get my permit through. Thanks again for following along, guys. Love you tons, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.